time to bring up our guest for today. Wow, I had a lot to go over. I'm sorry, Trace. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, you had a lot to cover there. I've never seen a DHL dress like that before. That was interesting. Yeah.
I don't
Like the
think I've
packaging made into a dress. Yeah,
I know. Like, where do they come up with this stuff? But I'm glad that they did, because listen, supply chain on the fashion runway is going to help all of us.
definitely, for sure.
All right, for anybody tuning in, I want to know where you're tuning in from. So make sure you put that in the comments. And while they are doing that, now, Trace, tell everybody who you are, what you do. Tell us a little bit about TSG Fleets.
Yes, I'm Trace Haggard. I'm the owner of TSG Fleet. We are an all-service terminal space provider, wheeled and stacked storage. We do the last and first mile for drayage, intermodal. We also do fleet maintenance. We kind of do everything for our customers in Southern California, the DFW metro area, and moving up into the Midwest, Kansas City, and Chicago soon. And that's where I am today. I'm in Chicago. I'm just not in the same exact hotel you are at, but we're here.
We're both
We're,
in it. We
we're
did not prepare for this very well, Trace.
no. This might be a faux pas, but I mean, I've got a lampshade here that I had to take off to make this all work. So yeah, I mean, I was up like 45 minutes ago trying to figure out the right lighting. I hope this works. So yeah,
No,
here
no,
we
no.
are.
You look great. And I have to tell everybody, I think we're going to share some behind the scenes too, because I got a lamp over here. I put myself in front of the window because I was like, that's going to be amazing lighting. But no, that didn't help.
Yes, I thought the city in the background, that would be perfect. No, it's not a good. Unless you sit on the floor, you can't really get it, into perspective. Yeah,
So if
so
we had
yeah,
organized this better, we probably could have like been in a room somewhere and done it
yeah,
live together.
exactly,
We did
totally.
not. And that is a
No,
complete fail on my part. But, anyways, we are here. We're having some fun. And now we need to get to the poll of the week. So let's bring up
yes,
the poll results because we asked this question, and we do a poll every single Wednesday morning. So what is the most important factor for you when selecting a fleet parking facility? Now, 54% of you said proximity to operational sites. 41% of you said safety of all vehicles. And then we had 4% for cost, 2% for other. Now, Trace, why was it important for us to ask the community this question? And what do you think about the results?
the results did not surprise me. Part of what I do from a strategic standpoint is I find areas in met in the metro areas. I find places where there's a thoroughfare of freight, whether it's a port or the railroad or just a major highway. And when I'm looking for sites to develop for container stacking or wheeled storage or fleet maintenance, obviously we're going to have our customers' equipment there. So the first things I think of is convenience, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure it's around where they're delivering and picking up. And secondly, security. Can you is the site in a general safe area, and can you secure the site? So those were the two major reasons for or the poll was the two
Yeah.
highest answers. Yeah.
Well, and so it wasn't surprising. One of the things that I have been hearing a lot about here at Inland is that shippers are really concerned with cargo theft. And we're going to talk about, I mean, this is only one part of the equation when it comes to cargo theft is where is the fleet parked? Where is our product, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in the next article, we are going to be talking about a different part of cargo theft, depending on where your inventory is, your manufacturing facilities are. And so it's a really big topic and kind of top of mind for everybody right now.
Yes, I agree. It is. Yeah, we've talked about it before too, the cargo theft. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, and we actually did a bit of a deeper dive on that. And you're going to be on the podcast in a few weeks. It's going to be episode 431. And so you can learn a little bit more about TSG Fleets, what they do, what we were talking about cargo theft as well on that particular episode. So I think we're about 4 weeks out from that. Now, this is the part of the show where I ask our guests to give a bit of a market update. So what are you hearing from your customers? What is top of mind for your customers? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think everybody is ready for, peak season to start. I think some of the carriers are starting to, do surcharges for peak season.
Mhm,
Peak season being peak freight season, right? We're going into the holidays, so it's a little bit later than traditionally, and we haven't really seen much of a peak season that we've seen historically.
mhm,
Uh, because of the freight recession that we're currently in. But people are, this is the time of year people are generally excited. I was in the lobby last night at the Westin at the Inland Logistics Conference, and there was a little bit of buzz of we're starting to see some freight volumes pick up, which is good, right? I mean, I hope that's the case, and then we wake up this morning and there's a strike at the port, so
yeah,
you know that
never ending.
which we'll get to in a minute. So that is the biggest market update, right? So right at the beginning of peak season, so it's very inconvenient, and usually that doesn't play out well freight wise. So especially during a peak season that we're
Yeah.
currently starting.
So lots of hot topics. Disruption as usual. I mean, supply chain professionals are kind of used to that up until
Yeah.
now. We're ready to adapt and sort of roll with the punches. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about that strike in just a minute because I do have a bit of an update. I was talking to Ari from the Journal of Commerce yesterday. He gave me a bit of an update, which I did share with a reporter, because there's a lot of information flowing around and we
Hmm.
don't want to set ourselves up for failure with this. We want some, so not some fake news running around about that. But first, we need to get to our first article. Now, this article I chose, and everybody knows that I really like the hustle. I get it on a daily basis. And whenever they talk about supply chain, I want to talk about it on this show. So this article came out, I think, just a few weeks ago at the beginning of September, and it talks about the biggest threat to supply
Whoa.
chain is hijackers. And like I said earlier, cargo theft is really top of mind for shippers here at Inland. And so this is a very timely article, especially as we're talking about nearshoring and moving manufacturing into Mexico. So a couple of things that stood out for me here is that our friends at Overhaul, they estimate that there's 21,000 hijackings on a yearly basis. And that actually equates to about 50 a day. So we need to think about the drivers. The drivers are under the impression that it's 2 hijackings a day. Overhaul saying it's 50 a day. They're getting kidnapped while they unload the product, and then they're being returned to a sort of a remote location. And because of this, this is not helping the shortage of drivers either, which we already have in the US, but that's now translating into Mexico with more and more companies moving into the region. Now, Walmart has moved in, Samsung, Amazon, Audi, Ford, just to name a few. But Mexico has surpassed China for a record number of imports, from what I'm seeing in this particular article. So, Trace, I'm going to pause there. What do you think about this? I mean, you work in Texas, and so you're working with a lot of products and movement across the border. What did you think about this article? And so talk to us about that.
I mean, I know cargo theft is a big problem, and I was surprised by the amount of hijackings. I think there was something like 8,000 just in one area alone in Mexico, which is shocking to me. Um, we do though, for our drivers, we have a fleet of drivers that operate between our space and the port or the intermodal terminals, and we have a training every month. They do videos and tests. And one of the trainings every year is what happens when you encounter cargo theft.
Mhm.
Usually, the way we train and the way we foresee it happening is someone will stop the movement of the truck and its container, and then when a driver senses that, we just tell them to get out of the truck and run. We don't stay with the freight, don't fight the driver. Just the safest thing to do is get as far away from the scene as possible,
Mhm.
um, in those types of incidents. And one of the benefits of intermodal freight using the train network is that you limit the distance between a manufacturing facility like, I see on this list here, you have Grupo Modelo. So wherever the brewery is in Mexico, right? The best way to get the beer here, the fastest, safest way is to put it on the train, get
Mm.
it into Alliance, Texas, and then have a very short distance between, Alliance, Texas ramp and wherever the distribution center is, right? It spends not so much time on the highway, whereas otherwise it'd have to go up the highway through Mexico, through the south of Texas, all the way to its final destination.
Well, and there's a lot of investment being poured into Mexico. Here at Inland, there's actually 4 sessions over today and tomorrow, I believe, specifically on this region and how to navigate it. And so you
Yes.
just brought up a really good point in the fact that when we're thinking about how we are going to move our goods, when we look at moving into a new region, we have to think about obviously the risks and what risks we're willing to take and what risks we're not. And part of that is the decision between how are we going to move that product? Is it going to be all truck? Is it going to be rail and truck? Is that the safest for us? Is that going to minimize our risk with cargo theft and hijackings? But it's a very, very real risk when you're thinking about moving into Mexico.
Yes. And I mean, the technology is amazing. Just this article alone, if you look at it, and I'm sure, what you'll learn when you study cargo theft is, there's so many different devices now that monitor freight, right?
Mhm.
So, they can pinpoint, 87% of these hijackings in Mexico, this particular case, are in the same state, region. So, they can track all that data and know to avoid certain places to
Yeah,
get your freight
absolutely.
safer.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So check out this article if you are thinking about moving any manufacturing into Mexico. Really important for some of your research when you're looking to do that so that you understand where other organizations are investing in the region, what the country is doing about security, and et cetera, et cetera. And it might surprise you who's actually organizing these robberies. It's not necessarily the cartels. Now, I want to give a shout out over on my personal LinkedIn to Jason, Uzman, Chelsea, and Parker. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now, if anybody has any questions for Trace throughout this conversation, just make sure to put that in the comments and we will definitely get to those. All right, let's get to our second article. So this is what everybody is talking about. So they did go on strike as of this morning. I spoke to Ari at the Journal of Commerce yesterday because I'm seeing a few celebrities going onto their Instagram and telling everybody that they need to go and stock up. So what we don't need right now is panic buying. Like, let's just not do that. I've spoken to a few retailers and they have been preparing, and some like supply chain professionals, they have been preparing for this. So they have been moving cargo through the West Coast, and LA and Long Beach has actually seen their highest months in August and September because of this. And some retailers are saying that they actually have 85% of their holiday inventory already here. And the next 15%, if they get it on time or not, is not a deal breaker. So Trace, talk to us about this. What do people need to know? I just wanted to stress the no panic buying because we don't need empty shelves of toilet paper again.
Yeah, no, let's avoid that at all costs. Especially if you're, short on toilet paper. You don't want to have that situation again. I mean, strikes are unfortunate, right? Any kind of work stoppage is unfortunate. And we knew this was coming for weeks. So, supply chain, thankfully for everybody that depends on us, we plan months, sometimes years in advance, and I believe everybody kind of knew this was coming. The contract, everybody knew when it was going to terminate, which was going to happen right as we discussed earlier in the beginning to middle of peak season.
Mhm.
Kind of convenient, right, from a leverage standpoint for the longshoremen. But just like anybody else, they deserve a fair wage. So we'll just have to wait it out. And yeah, no panic buying. Volume is up significantly on the West Coast. In Southern California, where I'm based, I live in Southern California, and that's where we have a fleet there as well. We're seeing, significant volume increases since the likes of probably the back end of the pandemic. When the ships were stacked up, we're not seeing the ships waiting in line out there like we did during the pandemic, but we're the volume is significant. We get hundreds of requests a day to move containers in and out of the port.
Wow. Well, and one of the other comments that I heard yesterday is that every day of the strike, there will be a few days backlog. So however long this goes on, just make sure as supply chain professionals that you're buffering that in, because it'll take a little bit of time to get ramped up and going again. One of the things that they did say is that if this goes into 1.5 to 2 weeks from now, then we need to really take a look at what we're doing. But until then, we do mostly have the inventory, and it is going through the West Coast. So we wish both sides, obviously, that they can come to the table and come to a good conclusion. Wage is on the table, but I think automation is on the table as well, because I believe that there is a little bit of trepidation around using automation to replace jobs. And I think that there is a little bit around automation and how it can enhance jobs as well. So hopefully they can come to a conclusion fairly soon, and we don't hit that 1.5 to 2 weeks from now. Anything else that you want to say to anybody else about the strike to think about?
Yeah, don't hit the panic button unless it goes on for a couple weeks, and then when you start reading about ships being rerouted, that's when you get nervous, right? Because then when ships get rerouted, that freight is going to end up arriving in a port of call that it wasn't originally intended for, and that really starts throwing off the supply chain network. So right now we're not there, so just be patient.
So celebrities, stop telling everybody to panic buy.
Exactly. Celebrities, yes. Oh gosh, yes.
All right, let's get to our next article. So this one is a lot of fun. Now, it's the world's largest wind power cargo ship, and it just made its first delivery across the Atlantic. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen this or followed this, but it's a new cargo ship powered by sails and wind, and they just went from France to New York City, powered by wind for at least 10 days of that particular routing. And the cargo that they were transporting is alcohol. Now, they talked about how they don't need as many crew because they do have remote control sails, so they don't need people manually putting up sails and taking them down and all that kind of stuff that we've seen in the past. And they also have custom routing software. So they're utilizing that to be able to, I think, predict the wind patterns and where they need to go and how they need to get there the fastest. But they also have diesel engines just in case. So for this inaugural sailing, they actually missed their window of good weather and they had to use the diesel engines, I think, for the first 5 days or so to get out of France and into the next location. So what do you think about this? I've got a few more things to talk about around this article, but I thought it was fascinating. What do you think?
It is. It's very fascinating. It's very cool. I'm glad you found it. I probably wouldn't have found, something like this on my own. Hopefully they can get it and they can scale it, right? I mean, I think there was something about a 1,000 tons is basically, is as much as they could get, where, a small container ship does a couple 100,000 tons, right, worth of freight. So I think it's a very cool concept. I guess I read that it's not only the cells, which uses the wind, but there's some kind of generator on board that also electrifies the vessel, right? So you don't, diesel is the last, it's option 3, right? So you got the cells, the electric generator, and then diesel, which they had to use in the inaugural voyage, but at least they got it going after a few days and got the cells up and made it on time.
Well, and what you do at TSG Fleet from a maintenance perspective, like when you saw this, was there any sort of like red flags or light bulbs that went off from a maintenance perspective? Because these are like long trips.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, especially, being out at sea like that, there's always the challenge of having the right equipment and
Mhm.
having all those different types of, power generation, like in our case, now more than ever, it used to be just diesel, and now you have to be prepared to troubleshoot a diesel engine as well as an electric vehicle.
Mhm.
We're seeing more and more electric vehicles, especially in California. So those are challenges, right? So,
Yeah.
but they're all good challenges, right? For sustainability and everybody minimizing their carbon footprint. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the 1,000 tons of cargo. So they can actually carry 1,000 tons of cargo on pallets. So they specifically
yes.
said pallets. I guess they're not hand bombing cargo
Well,
to
yeah, it should be. I would love to see this vessel in port because I would love to see how they get the pallets on and off. I guess it has its own crane system that they lift pallets of champagne, right? It's
yeah,
champagne and wine, I think,
yes,
is
it
what's
was
on this,
champagne and wine. I mean, they
like the
must have
ultimate booze cruise. Yeah.
they popped one of those bottles when they got to New York City successfully, of course, of course.
That's
But you're
1,000 tons of champagne. That's a lot of bubbly for sure. Yeah.
well, but you're right. You just brought up a really good point because ports are set up for traditional container ships. So what
Yes.
happens when this, sailing cargo ship pulls into port? How are they offloading the cargo? Because they're not going to use traditional cranes, right? So I would be interested in finding a little bit more about that.
I would love to see it at Portugal. I just want to, yeah, see how they get the champagne off the boat for sure. Would definitely like to see
Without
that.
breaking anything. So a
Yeah.
1,000 tons of cargo on pallets. They said this is only the first one. They've got 6 on order, and their vision is to go to hundreds of these sailboats for cargo. What one of the things that they said was for brands, there's a few reasons why they are using them to move the cargo. One is it's helping them meet their climate goals, which you talked about, the sustainability component. Number two is predictable pricing. Because they're mostly using wind to move the cargo, I guess they don't really necessarily have too much of a fluctuation in pricing. Although I'd be interested to see what that base price is, to see where we're starting from in comparison to a cargo,
Yes,
right? Um,
definitely. Yeah.
Number three, they actually said it's good marketing for the brand. I mean, I can see that. And I'm glad that they've
Mhm.
actually, said that. They have a QR code actually for the product so that you can see the journey and understand the sustainability component, which is very cool for especially traceability and people looking at CO2 emissions when they're buying from brands, that kind of thing. And then, of course, the CO2 savings is the last thing that they talked about as being a benefit from working with them. They call it a TOWT, and I don't have it brought up to remember what that actually stands for. I thought it was a bit of a weird name, but anyways, go check the article to find out what TOWT stands for. But we have come to the end of the show. So Trace, I want to thank you so much for joining me today, especially on the
Thank you,
road.
Sarah.
And I'm probably
Yeah,
going to see you.
one transoceanic wind transport is what the
Thank
TO. There you go. Yeah, TOW, whatever. Yeah,
you.
exactly. And
TOWT.
make sure you don't get a fuel surcharge on your invoice because yeah, that wouldn't make sense, would it? On this one,
Anybody
yeah.
has an invoice from this, we want to see it. Send it to Trace and I in our DMs
Okay.
on LinkedIn. Well, anyways, Trace, I'm probably going to see you in about 30 minutes at the
Yep,
inland.
I'll run into. Yeah, I'll be
And
down there in a minute. Yeah.
I want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. I will be back next week with Audrey Ross, and we've got some fun stuff to talk about then. So we'll see you then. And Trace, thank you so much for joining me today.
Bye. Thank you.